Hello everyone. In this video I will show you how to automate your Notion workflows using Procesio. We will see how to configure Notion to be able to make API call to it, and then how to retrieve data from a database and how to insert data in a Notion database. Let's start in Procesio. I have created one process, it's empty now. I've just renamed it Notion DB tutorial. So the workflow of this process is very simple because what we want first is to retrieve data from a Notion database. So I will just have one call API action that I will configure to be able to make the call to the Notion database. So let's have a look first at how it looks like my database in Notion. So this database is very simple. I have just one row and few columns, first name, last name, email, and ID. So I will show you how to retrieve this data in Procesio, and then how to add the new rows in this database. As usual, the main action to do when creating a process that is going to call external API is to have a look at the documentation of the API. So let's go to the developers page of Notion, and if you scroll down a bit, you will find the API reference. So you click on it, and it will give you all the information you need to make the API call. So what we want to do is to make calls to databases. So here, if you look at here, there is one endpoint here, one methods that will give us the capability to make a query to a database and retrieve some data. So it's a post method, and you see here the URL that we need to configure to be able to retrieve the data in the databases. If you have a look at the example given here, you see that, so it's a post, of course, method. You see that we find our URL. Then there is few parameters to add. The first one is the Notion API key. So I will show you how to create this Notion API key to be able to get the authorization to access the API of Notion and to access your specific database. Then there is one parameters which you have to input, which is the Notion version, and another one which is the content type. The last part is the body of your post request. If you want to do some filtering, you can do it. I won't do it now because I just have one line anyway, one row, and I want to make it simple. Let's start by creating this API key that we need to make our API call. Go to your Notion.so My Integrations page, and here in this page you will find all your integration that you have created. So I have one existing for Procesio because I'm using it personally, and I will create a new one for the purpose of this demo. So you create a new integration, you give a name to your new integration, so let's call it Procesio tutorial here, and that's all. You submit, and now Notion has created for you a new secret key, API key. You can have a look at it. It starts with secret and a lot of numbers and letters, and we will use it in our call. So go back in the documentation, and I will copy the URL to make the call. Copy it, and now in Procesio I will configure my credential to be able to access the API in Notion. So I have to create a new credential. I will create it. I will call it Procesio API. It's a REST API. Click on next, and here I will paste the beginning of the URL, this part. By doing it, it will give me the opportunity to call different endpoint of Notion. Then I will configure it as an API key authentication. And if we go back in the documentation, the key is authorization. And the value of the key should start with bearer. And after you put your secret key that you have just created here. So click on copy and you paste it here. Okay, it's an header, so you put in the header. I cannot test my connection here because if you look at the documentation, you see that there is few other things to configure in the header, like the Notion version and the content type. But in Procesio, for the moment, you don't have the opportunity to add many different parameters in the header. So I will just save my credential. It is not validated, but anyway, it will work later, you will see in the process. So now that I've created my credential, I just have to select it, and then I will configure the API call. So it's a post that we want to do, and as you can see here, and then I will copy the end of the URL and paste it here. Okay, now we need to replace this by our database ID. So if you look at the documentation, they explain you, not here, but if you click on this get, they explain you where you can find the database ID. So database ID is the series of letters and numbers that you have in your in the URL of your database. So if you open the database, you see this series of numbers. So you copy it and you paste it here. Okay. And we are done with the configuration of the URL endpoint. Now in the header, so we have the authorization secret key that has been configured in the credentials, so we don't need to add it again, but we need to insert, so go back, sorry, to this query database. So we need this Notion version parameter here, and the value of it is this date. And then we need another one, which is the content type. And this one is the application JSON. Okay, so I think we're good now. One thing we should do is, of course, to create to add the status code. So it's an integer. I have created it already. So it's an integer that you put here that will help to debug if there is an issue. And the output, I've created it already. It's a JSON. It's an object. It will be a JSON that we receive from the call. So I put it here as well. So now, before running our process, I can save it first. But before running it, there is something that I forgot to do. Is in our database page, we need to configure it to accept the call. That means we need to link this integration that we have created in this page. We need to link this integration to this database page, because Notion gives us a lot of flexibility to really configure where we want to accept or not integration. So to be able to do that, you click on this dot here, and you click on Add Connection. And if you cannot see it here, you refresh your page and you will find it. And now I have refreshed the page, so if I click on this dot, connection, I will be able to find this new integration that we have created. So I click on it, it will ask me if I really want to do it. Okay, I confirm, and now everything is configured on Notion. Our process is also configured in Procesio, so now I can run it. I run, I check instance, and let's have a look at the output. Okay, so it has run. It's very fast. You can see. Let's have a look at the variable. So output 200. So everything looks good, and the JSON output contains the data of the table. You see, we have the email, we have the ID, the last name. So everything is there. Okay, so now you know how to retrieve data from Notion database. So now we will add a new action to insert new data.